I'm the third generation of a Swedish family that's born and raised here in Tanzania, and we've been working and living here since the early 60s. Ganam has 3 concessions here in Tanzania. Been operating in Moyo South for 3 years now, and last year we took over management of Kisigo Central and Kisigo West. We've had to reactivate the anti-poaching efforts in the area and the conservation work that we do.
We started with an helicopter. When you are using a helicopter, even the poachers will not be able to escape. So normally the helicopter come down, we capture all the poachers, we take them away up to the vehicle position, we put in the vehicle, we proceed to the police stations. Around Kisigo we have more than 20 villages. The situation is keep increasing, the number of villages, because of these nomadic pastoralists, the Skuma people. They normally came to the village leaders and they request for areas to buy for their settlement. The village leaders, they normally provide the area with no limit. What happened due to that? The nomadics cleared the area up to the boundary level. Even in the buffer zone, we have no longer have this buffer zone. After the boundary, we got the settlement of the people, and mostly are the pastoralists. That's the situation which, if we are not taking care, it can be a very big problem to the most of the game reserves, including Kisigo.
Controlled burning in these wilderness areas here in Tanzania is a very important part of managing these concessions here. Putting a fire in the bush is not something that you do haphazard. There's a lot of thought that goes into it, and there's a lot of planning needed before you put a match to the grass. And the beginning of the season is really when most of the burning takes place. The reason behind that being that that's when the soil still contains a lot of moisture in it after the rainy season. After the grass has been burnt, it promotes new growth that's very healthy and nutritious for the wildlife. Another reason being you need to be able to control your borders and make sure that fires from the outside don't come in and go into your area during a time when everything is dry, because when the soil is completely dry and there's no moisture left in it, you're not going to have anything grow there for the next of the year, and the animals are going to vacate the area completely and they're not going to come back until it rains. The wildlife authorities in Tanzania have previously had a very non-intrusive approach to their habitat management, where they've chosen not to get too involved, with how the ecosystem works and the natural order of things. We all feel the effects of climate change here in Tanzania, and certainly in some of these dry areas like Kisigo, and the government actually made the decision that we need to help the ecosystem a little bit, and started the project of putting in a few ponds and lakes in the area to sort of make water a bit more accessible for the wildlife in there and to try to keep them in the area for longer. So what we do is that we seek out areas where these natural drainage lines move through the country, and then we dig a hole there. We bring in excavators and bulldozers and everything, and then during the rainy season the water fills up naturally from the rainwater and creates a big lake. The aim is for the water to remain there throughout the dry season, for it to become a reliable source of water for the animals. Another challenge in these areas is that when the natural water sources dry out, animals move away from the wilderness areas and they go closer to the local communities to look for water and look for food. But it is our hope now, with these lakes and the ponds that we've put in, wildlife will remain in the wilderness and not seek to go into the communities and destroy their farms and destroy their crops. Last year, during the beginning of this project, we created 3 ponds, and we saw that they worked really well. They filled up nicely with water during the rainy season. So this year we're going to put in another 7 in there, and hopefully all of them will work out and will hold a significant amount of water for the wildlife in the future. In Kisigo, last year we invested in a good amount of trail cameras that we've put out into the area, into strategic areas, over water holes and onto roads, with the aim of really capturing the game that's moving through the area and get an idea about what's there and what isn't there. Primarily to understand what the densities are like and how they are moving throughout the areas. At the end, what we really want is to create a database that can be used for scientific purposes and for research in the future on how to improve conditions in the game reserve. The way it's structured in Tanzania is that you have the national parks, that are 100% protected areas. There's sort of a core area within an ecosystem that contains big densities of wildlife, and there's no human habitation or activity allowed within a national park. It's completely funded by the state. Surrounding the national parks, they have the game reserves, which acts as a buffer zone to the core area, which is the national park. And these game reserves are then leased out to the private sector, where investors can go and take on these leases for these reserves for hunting activities. We're in between the community and the national park, sort of the first line of defense here. So when an operator signs the lease to take on a concession here in Tanzania, they also take on the responsibility and agree to work in conjunction with the wildlife authorities here in Tanzania to contribute to conservation and anti-poaching efforts in the areas. And that also includes opening of the roads, infrastructure, maintaining bridges, building roads, that make the area accessible throughout the year.
Ganam joined Kizigo Game Reserve last year, and when he came with a lot of strategies on how to combat the anti-poaching issues. And due to that time, the poaching was very rampant in Kizigo.
So when Ganam took over the lease of Kizigo Central and West last year, these areas had been vacant and dormant for a few years back, and so we've put in a lot of work, to try and open up the infrastructure again, to open the roads, put in all year-round roads to give us access to the area throughout the year. In the year that we've been there, we've opened up well over 1,000 kilometers of roads in the areas. We've resurfaced them. We've put in a new airstrip, which we've also surfaced so that planes can land there throughout the year, bringing much needed access into this remote area. The Kizigo ecosystem primarily faced challenges in terms of illegal mining, poaching, fishing, honey harvesting. Dodoma, which is the administrative capital of Tanzania, is only 200 kilometers away, and there's a big demand for bushmeat in these areas.
Poachers, when they enter in the game reserves, especially here in Kizigo, they are not targeting one resource. They are going there to get anything they want.
There's been a lot of challenges in this area, particularly with illegal mining. Locals come in from far away to go into the mountains in the area to mine for gold.
If they meet with the animal, they shoot the animals. If they meet the honey hives, they work on it. They work on lumbering. Cutting
down these beautiful mahogany trees that have taken 200 years to grow to what they are, and are cut down in a manner of hours, only to make a few planks and then made into a table, which is really a tragedy in these areas. To be able to operate successfully in these remote concessions out here, it's important to have a good working relationship with the Tanzanian Wildlife Authority, and we're always in close communication with the project managers and the anti-poaching coordinators, for example. These areas are big, they're difficult to access, and we need all the help that we can get. Our challenges here become much easier to handle when we work together.
I advise him to, if possible, we can add more game scouts to support the rangers, because we are not enough to cover all the area. He agreed with that proposal, and we hired about 10 village game scouts. And after hiring those 10 village game scouts, we split them in two main groups. 5 village game scouts. With the ranger from Kizigo, we form one team, and another 5, we form another team. Ganam has 7 permanent workers who are dealing with anti-poaching. We add those 7, we form another third group. With those third groups, we split it to the all points which we think there is severe poaching incidences, and from that time the poaching incidences reduced by about, we can say, 90%.
The Muhesi Game Reserve is adjacent to the Kizigo Game Reserves in the north, and is part of this whole Kizigo Rungwa Muhesi ecosystem. It's been vacant for many years, hasn't had a tender in it for a long time, and with that, there hasn't been a lot of conservation efforts in the area. So we take it upon ourselves to extend our patrols into this area too, because when things go wrong in Muhesi, that spills over into Kizigo. So we try to help as much as we can in these areas that are vacant too.
The vehicle are not easily moved during the rainy season. We introduced the tactic of using the motorcycles because the poachers are normally using bicycles. The rangers can move faster than the poacher, and normally the motorcycles do maneuver even in the places where the vehicle cannot maneuver. That one helps a lot. We reached to the areas where we never reached before, and even the poachers. How did you manage to reach here? Because years and years, there is no one have been reached here, but you managed to reach here. Nowadays you are finished. Because of what? Because of the tactics of using the motorcycles.
The Moyowosi-Kigosi ecosystem here is a significant chunk of wilderness and one of the more important wetlands in East Africa. This game reserve is 3,000 square kilometers big. The swamps and the marsh areas, they contain a significant population of shoebill storks and East African Sidatunga in densities you don't see in many other places in Africa. With it being a wetland, obviously very important for significant fish population and amphibians, with the permanent water sources that are available throughout the year, attracts large numbers of buffalo and other big ungulates, with lions and the leopards and everything that go with them. Some of the challenges that we face around the Moyowosi here, obviously poaching is a big problem. Organized meat poaching, groups coming in here to poach giraffe, hippo and buffalo to sell bushmeat on the black market. Illegal timber harvesting is also a big problem, for the illegal charcoal trade industry, cutting down vast tracts of woodland, just to create charcoal. Illegal fishing is also a big problem here, and people using unsustainable fishing methods, fishing with mosquito nets and the likes, taking everything out of the waters here. Then another issue that we face in these areas would also be the illegal beekeeping and harvesting of honey. This harvesting of the honey here in these wilderness areas is a problem, because a large amount of people move in here on bicycles, and they spread out over the forest, to hang their hives in the trees. With that comes a lot of illegal activities. They'll shoot any wildlife that they can to bring with them to the village. They'll cut down trees for firewood. We even have cases, where we found illegal weapons stashed and stored in these beehives. It's a big challenge that we faced here. The cattle encroachment around the Moyowosi ecosystem is another challenge that we face here, and while we don't want the cattle in our area to mix with the wildlife, the problem is also that the people who are herding the cattle also participate in a lot of other illegal activities. Wherever they can, they'll fish, they'll poach, they'll cut down trees and everything. So with the cattle comes a lot of other challenges too. The Tanzanian Wildlife Authority recently invested in an airboat that they imported from abroad and brought it here specifically to use in the Moyowosi ecosystem for conservation purposes here. So in a joint effort between them and ourselves, we go on patrols together, and our organization also support them with the fuel and the manpower that they need to enable these patrols here. The airboat is a very important tool here in Moyowosi because obviously this area being a wetland, access is very difficult, and your old canoes and regular boats, they're not as quick and they can't access all the areas where we need to go. So the airboat is just a fantastic tool for that, to reaching these far-flung places in the swamp and looking for illegal fishing activities and illegal grazing, cattle encroachment and such things. Tourist activities here in Moyowosi, they cease in late October, November, for the reason that it's almost completely impossible to operate here when the rains come in and the areas are completely flooded. And move around the areas like we can in the dry season. So while tourist activities cease, the conservation efforts that we do here, they never stop. And our teams are on the ground here throughout the year, and they move around in canoes, they move around in amphibious vehicles, airboats to get around in the swamps. They do motorcycle patrols, patrolling the borders and making sure that there aren't any intrusions in the area. With this being an extremely remote area too, we're over 200 kilometers from the nearest place where we can resupply, and during at least 4 months of the year this area is completely inaccessible. So before that we have to make sure that we stock up on all the supplies that are necessary for the team to be able to operate here during the rainy season. They need all the fuel, they need all the food that they can get to be able to operate successfully here during these challenging times. So after the rainy season, the crews come back from town, they come back with all the tents and all the equipment that we need to get our tourist activities back on track again. We come in here with bulldozers to open up the roads, we come in with crews, to open the roads throughout the area, cut all the branches and remove all the logs that have fallen on the roads. The camp team, they move in there to put up the tents and put everything back together and get ready for when the tourists are back in the area. Working in such a remote area obviously is a logistical nightmare most of the time. So the crew that we have out here and everyone who works out there, we're jack of all trades. You have to be able to do a little bit of everything here. We have mechanics on site, we have electricians on site, we have plumbers here and everything, because when something goes wrong out here, we can't drive the 200 kilometers to go to the nearest shop to get whatever we need. We need to be able to do most things here on site. We need to be self-sufficient when it comes to repairing our vehicles. We need to have stock of supplies and spare parts and everything.